Hey everyone, how's it going today? Welcome back to another third stimulus check unemployment benefits extension update. So we actually have relatively great news, or certainly hopeful news, to share in today's update, especially during a time of, I think, when there's a lot more brighter news, hopefully to be desired. But the idea right now is that, as some of you guys remember, and probably about a video that I made last week, I believe it's literally just called Can It Come Back, which I'll also put at the end screen, we talked a little bit about the potential of whether or not the unemployment decisions to end can ever be reversed again. And part of that video talks a little bit about what politicians have specifically been doing, such as like Bernie Sanders and the people that have been making attempts. But the other part of that video, I talked a little bit about my own personal insights, so not necessarily something from a news article, but just myself, about what I feel personally about whether or not I think it can be reversed. And one of the things that I mentioned in that video was about how personally, if I just had to, just gut it, is that the hope is that potentially, if enough people are able to come together to maybe potentially create a lawsuit of some kind, maybe, just maybe, they can potentially extend or certainly reverse the decision with unemployment. And the logic really is because, and this is something just from personal experience with just lawsuits, I'm not a lawyer. I am someone, however, that have had to deal with lawsuits before, which is actually kind of a little bit of a sad statement, but it's just a part of life sometimes. But the story is that a lot of times when it comes to doing lawsuits, it is very, very possible, and it's actually very, very common a lot of times, that people sometimes will put in a lawsuit not necessarily because they think they can win the lawsuit per se, but simply just by having the lawsuit physically be there, it can potentially prolong a certain something, especially if that particular something is a very time-sensitive matter that you are trying to sue or put that lawsuit, which in this case happens to be the unemployment system. So the really, really relatively great, or certainly at least hopeful news is that there are actually now many states that are now trying, or certainly many people within select states that are now coming out to try to fight. And one of the states specifically that's being featured on the news happens to be Indiana, which at this current time, I believe, is that they are now 2 lawsuits inside of Indiana that are trying to be hit at the governor. I believe his name is Governor Holcomb, who they're basically trying to now sue him to reverse the decision to potentially bring back the unemployment again. So in today's update, I really just want to talk a little bit about what that lawsuit is physically about, what's involved, and what this actually can potentially mean for a lot of the other states that are going forward. So we're going to talk all about that, but as always, real fast, the same drill before we begin is always remember to smash the like button, especially because it is going to be hopefully something more positive that we're going to be talking about today after much needed events that have been happening all over the news. Consider subscribing and hitting the bell for similar videos like this and other finance, and as always, feel free to comment any questions, thoughts, or maybe even just predictions about honestly just really anything at all. So with that being said, let's get this video started right now. So the story that's going on right now in Indiana is that there's currently now 2, so not just one, but actually 2 law firms, and then of course many people within those law firms, that are hiring these law firms, that have now actually officially sued Governor Holcomb, which is the governor of Indiana, in order to try to reverse the decision. And I believe specifically in that case, what they are pleading is that they're trying to sue him in the belief that what he is doing is actually against the law, and that citizens should have the right to be able to continue on the unemployment program, not just because it's what actually is physically needed because of what is going on now in that state, and again probably in many, many states, if anything at all, given the situation that we're still recovering, but also because it was actually physically signed in the third stimulus package. And so the story right now, I believe, is that they're trying to get together in order to approve something called a preliminary injunction, which, if you're not familiar with what that is, in simple terms, is that it's pretty much just something that you can put in a legal case in order to kind of delay a certain action until the case is solved. So essentially how this applies is that if they're able to put in this preliminary injunction, then it's going to potentially allow the people to continue on the unemployment program until the case is physically closed or just solved in general, and then they can kind of continue on with their regular activity, which is pretty much exactly like what I've pretty much tried to predict, you know, if you guys remember from the last video, which the great news is we are now actually seeing at least some kind of attempt. We don't know if it's official, but we are at least seeing some kind of attempt in trying to make it happen. It's especially true because I believe that by the very end of this week, there are already officially 8 states that will be ending their unemployment program, well, by the end of this week. So the hope is, and Indiana happens to be one of them, so the hope is that if one state can do it, maybe now there is a chance that other states can at least take the attempt to try to do it as well. Now, if by any chance you happen to be from a state that thankfully is now currently set to stay on their unemployment program, or if you're just someone who's kind of on the edge and you're a little bit hesitant about it, then I think the great news is that this video should hopefully highlight some of the details about what can potentially be done to kind of reverse the decision. Or I think it's also just honestly really interesting just on the lawsuit side of just learning about the legal side of everything that's been going on. I do know is that if you're looking to try to stay on your unemployment, many states, just maybe a quick insert, are potentially going to be starting to do work search. I did make a video which I believe it's literally just called How to Stay on Unemployment, so definitely check that out if that's interesting. If by any cold chance, just random chances that you're still waiting for your taxes, unemployment taxes, I do also have another video about that which I'll put at the end screen. But basically the story right now is that the hope is that if they're able to kind of go through with that lawsuit, it's going to at least, we don't know if they're going to be able to win that lawsuit, but just by having that lawsuit physically exist out there, it's going to potentially, hopefully, at least prolong it. So let's just say that the unemployment, we don't know how long it's going to go for, but it's going to go for hopefully something longer than this week, which is actually the exact week that Indiana is planning to potentially end at this current time. And I think the really relatively hopeful thing about this, I think, is really just the fact that if one state, which specifically now is Indiana, is able to actually manage to carry through with it, the hope is maybe this can act as some kind of inspiration for a lot of the other states now to try to take action as well. In fact, there actually are certain states that have actually now started to take action, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. It's just that they just haven't done it in such a scale as Indiana to actually bring it to the actual court, you know, and try to do what they're doing. But the real hope, right, is that exactly how, you know, it basically ended to begin with, is that as long as the hope is that if one state is able to start this, maybe other states can eventually try to follow along and try to reverse it. This is even more true because keep in mind is that the actual ending of unemployment early also started with one state. If you guys remember from about, like, you know, I believe it was about a month ago when this whole thing started, it started with Montana. You know, as soon as the very first state, Montana, ended, that was when it created a chain of just, you know, dominoes and reactions that slowly, one by one, a whole bunch of states started to end as well. And now we're literally at 26 states. So the hope is maybe Indiana can be the symbol of hope to maybe start as kind of some inspiration for more states to follow as well. And actually, in fact, there are actually now several states that are doing their own thing. For example, I believe right now that actually in Florida, there are actually a lot of protests supposedly that are going on now in Florida. This is much more local news, so I don't think it's like nationwide, but supposedly is that there are actually a lot of protests there right now in order to try to reverse the decision there. I believe also there are also a lot of people in Maryland, I believe, that are trying to plea the case to the governor, so Governor Hogan specifically, to try to also reverse the decision. One of the people that are that's trying to plea the case is interestingly the mayor of Baltimore. So these are, you know, relatively pretty big figures. So the idea overall is that there are definitely a lot of states that are now already starting to take action to try to reverse the decision, but we now officially have the first state that has now actually done it on the true legal side and is hoping to try to actually physically go through and actually truly push to take it to the next level. But essentially, that's what I pretty much just wanted to cover in today's update because I think it's relatively breaking news in its own way. And the fact that a lot of this stuff is actually relatively time urgent because Indiana is set to end in basically just a couple of days now, in just less than a week, there are 8 states that are now set to end in less than a week. So the hope is that maybe, you know, over the next couple of days, we have to see how the lawsuit physically goes. Maybe consider subscribing. If you guys are brand new here, it's always greatly appreciated, and always happy to have new people so you guys can get updates. Huge thanks if you guys have been here for a while. Always happy to see familiar faces. And as always, with that being said, maybe consider smashing the like button if you haven't done so. Feel free to comment any questions, thoughts about, honestly, just really anything at all. And with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Stay safe, stay well, and hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.